Hi, I'm Phil and I'm here to share my experience of living with end-stage renal failure. This is the third video in a series about doing dialysis at home, doing hemodialysis at home. So far in the last two, we've set the machine up and got everything ready to go. Today in this video is when I get on the machine. So that does mean that I'm going to be putting a couple of needles in my arm, and there's a little bit of blood. But if you're concerned about that, if you feel a bit uncomfortable about watching that, there's a little warning like this that will appear in the bottom corner of the screen. It'll tell you how far ahead you need to jump to skip those things. To be honest, they're not, from my perspective anyway, they're not that gory, and that's coming from someone who really doesn't like needles very much. So, you know, if you have to skip ahead, totally understand, no judgment. But if you want to know what doing hemodialysis is like, then can I suggest that if you possibly can, you watch the video the whole way through. Right, well, I've spent enough time on this introduction. Let's get into actually doing it.
As always, we start off with hygiene, so just give my hands a bit of a wash. You'll note that I've tied my beard up too. It's gotten so long I can't see my arm when I'm sticking the needles in, so I have to get it out of the way. Speaking of the needles, here they are. Just checking that the cap at the top opens and closes easily, and there's a clamp on the tube connected to the needles, and I move that down to the end near the cap. If I leave it up near where the needle is in my arm, then when I open and close the clamp, I can actually wiggle the needle in my arm, and that can be quite painful depending on where it's located at the time. Okay, needle's done. Right, next thing is the peg. At the moment this is just for convenience to get the sleeve out of the way, but you'll see down the track that it has an ulterior use as well. Right now, the light is because my depth perception is not too flash, and it actually helps me see what I'm doing on my arm. I only leave it on for this part of the job. It comes off afterwards. Feeling for the pulse or the thrill in my arm, which is where the blood is pulsing in my fistula, and now we're going to wipe it down with an alcohol swab. The thing with the thrill in your fistula is that it can move around a little bit. It generally stays in the same place, or for me it does. Although when I get to the top of the fistula, it does curve around a bit to the left. So these are the mats that I was talking about when we laid out the on-pack. They protect the pillow from any blood seepage. Generally, if there is any, it's a little dribble. Although occasionally I leak quite a bit more blood if something doesn't go quite to plan, and it takes quite a lot of blood to soak all the way through that. Here's your warning, by the way. Skip the next 6 minutes if you don't want to see the needles in blood. Right, on to the local anesthetic. Now, when I was being trained to do hemodialysis at home, the goal was for me to be weaned off local anesthetic. And the reasoning that a number of nurses told me was local anesthetic, it feels like a bee sting, which is true, it does. It's very short-lived, but it's quite sharp. But it's no different to putting the big needle in your arm. Now, I beg to differ. So here we're just taking the needle off the saline, and I've just realized to put the needle in the rubbish bag, which is really bad. It should have gone in the sharps container. Okay, getting the needle ready to put it in my arm. Now the thing with this needle is, compared with the local, is that the pain is a lot deeper, and I find it can last the whole session, which is quite different to the local. So I've just stayed using local. Okay, now at that point I'm theoretically given the local time to kick in, but I think that's probably not terribly necessary, but it does give me a few seconds to psych up to doing this, which is putting the needle in my arm. Now that one's gone pretty well, I think. So I'm waiting for it to get in far enough to the fistula for the blood to start pumping the needle, and you can just see that in by my fingers there. So at this point I'm pushing it a bit further into my arm. I'll tell you what, I really hate needles. I do this with 2 needles 3 times a week, and I still haven't gotten over hating needles. It's just something you've got to do. You've got to make yourself do it, because this saves my life every time I do it. I can't explain to you how much of a love-hate relationship this is with dialysis. I really appreciate that it saves my life, but man, I hate putting the needles in. And I hate them sitting in there while I'm actually doing dialysis. Alright, so this is using the blood pressure in my body to push the blood up to the end of the tube, clamp it closed so that when we take the cap off, we don't have blood spraying everywhere. Cap goes in the bloods in the bio waste bag, and there's your syringe. So the idea of the syringe is to make sure there's no blockage either in my arm or in the tube. That's all gone pretty smoothly. I also watch my arm to make sure I'm not blowing out the fistula when I push the syringe down. So it's the same thing again. There needs to be a 2 finger width distance minimum between the 2 needles for dialysis to work properly. Quite often I'll go a little bit more. That's the minimum, of course. It depends on where the previous needle site and so on was from the previous day, whether this is right on the 2 fingers or a bit further. Right. Alright, done with that. That will eventually go in the sharps container. I don't bother getting rid of rubbish and stuff until I'm finished. Right, now that one went in the sharps container, which is where it should have gone, where the first one should have gone. Right, needle, those handles, the wings on the needle have actually got grips to make it easier to hold them when they're, they disappeared again, to make it easier to hold them when you're maneuvering the needle into your arm. One of the things that I used to have a real problem with was seeing the hole where I'd put the locals so that I could put this needle in the same hole, which is the key to it being reasonably painless, actually. But I've gotten the hang of that over the months, so there we go. That one went in really well, went really quick. Now, I don't know how they did it, but I seem to recall the nurses when I was in the unit always being able to keep the tape away of the top needle away from the tape of the bottom needle. I can never do it. They always overlap. I'm not putting the needles closer together than I'm supposed to or anything, so I don't know, maybe I'm just a messy taper. So the trick with these 3 different tapes is to make sure that the needle is held in place. It doesn't move around in your arm while you're doing the dialysis, because you can see every time I move my arm, it moves the muscle and so on up there. So yeah, just check the pressure on that one again. Looking good. Watching the arm there. Do it a couple of times just to be sure. And clamp. Right, time for a quick cleanup. Into the sharps, what we need to put there. Remembering everything that's got blood on or in it goes in the bio bag, the yellow rubbish bag in front of us. Okay, I'm looking around here because I forgot to put my blood pressure cuff on the ball starter. So my wonderful wife's going to have to come over and help. She's not always sitting in the room when I get on. It's just that because I was filming, I knew I would forget something and need help with this. The other thing is that cuff. It's really hard to put on one-handed, so it's quite helpful to have someone else to help with that. Okay, so before we start anything else, I'm just going to take my blood pressure. Right, once the blood pressure is completed, I record it on the chart. So there's 4 blood pressures. There's before, 5, sorry, before, halfway through, 1 hour before the end, half an hour before the end, and after the session. So, got that done, out of the way. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so I'm now going to actually get on the machine. So, just make sure everything's reachable, and then I stop the pump. Tell the machine I'm connecting the patient, and then close all the clamps. Right, so now this is where I get attached to the machine. So the loop of the lines on the machine will now be attached to the lines into my arm. So red one is arterial, blue one is venous. Going to keep that little bit for later. Right, next thing, open all the clamps. Now there's a bit to do when you first turn the machine on, so turn the machine on, reach over and open the clamp on the heparin, and then you can see the dialyzer was blue side to the top. We need it to be red side to the top, so we twist that and turn it around. When I'm setting up the machine, I try and arrange it so that it's easy to do that one-handed, but sometimes cables get twisted, lines get twisted, or it gets caught on a pillow or something, but generally I can do it myself. There's also a little clamp on the, there we go, a little clamp on there to tighten it up, make sure it stays upright. Okay, so more chart filling. I need to check several things. First is that the saline line, that's the extra line into the bloods, is clamped, that the heparin clamp is open, that the dialyzer is red side up, and that I have a full bag of saline at the top. After a little while, once the blood has gone all the way through the lines, the pump actually stops, so we start it again and move it up to 200 milliliters a second. When that happens, we'll also start the UF, which is taking the water off, the fluid off my body. And here's the other use for the clip. Hold the lines in place, but that's not the only way we do that. I also tape them down on my arm. This is a great waxing on my arm every time I take this off. But I used to try and take them to the underside of my arm, but I have found that they hold better if I do them over the top. So it's just the way it is. So the idea of that is to make them accessible. So if I have to clamp things, which I do later on, I can see what I'm doing and get it right. Okay, so we've been at 200 for long enough. Record the pump. Oh, what's going on there? Oh, the amount of fluid in the air detector had dropped, so I was winding that up. And that's why that flashing light you can see reflected in my face is telling me there's air in the fluid detector. And once it's confirmed there's no more, I can just hit the confirm button. I'd forgotten that it happened when I recorded this. Here. So I got the pressure, the venous pressure in my chart from when the pump was running at 200 milliliters. And then I've moved it up to 300, which is the speed at which my dialysis is done for the rest of the session. I'm just waiting for the venous pressure to stabilize. We'll record that. And the UF rate. And then that's it. I'm on the machine. Good to go for the rest of the session. I'll hang around, do some video editing, maybe watch some movies or something, and we'll be back in about 4.5 hours.
Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you enjoyed it or found it interesting, I'd appreciate it if you could hit like. If you want to know more about what it's like living with end-stage renal failure, then go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.